Chosen one, have you ever felt like something inside of you was meant for more? Like the life you're living now is a far cry from what you truly want, but you just can't quite grasp what that more is. Maybe you've tried so hard to fit in, to follow the expectations of your family, your friends, or society, only to feel more lost and disconnected than ever before. If this sounds familiar, know that you're not alone. And it's not by accident. You were never meant to fit in. In fact, the very struggles you're facing are the signs that God is preparing you for something far greater. You're not just another person going through the motions. You were chosen for something unique. It's time to wake up to that truth. In the busyness of life, it's easy to forget who we truly are. The world tells us we need to conform, to be like everyone else, to keep up with the Joneses. The pressure is everywhere, in your work, in your relationships, in the social media feeds that flood your phone daily. It's easy to start believing that if you just try harder, you'll finally fit in. But what if I told you that trying to fit in is the very thing that's been holding you back from living the life you were called to live? That's right. You were made for more than just blending in. You were made to stand out. Right now, you're at a crossroads. You can continue trying to force yourself into a mold that doesn't fit, or you can embrace your divine calling and rise above the noise. God has been speaking to you all along, and now it's time for you to listen. It's time to accept that your path was never meant to be ordinary. This is the moment where everything changes. So, if you're ready to step into your calling and leave behind the life that's been holding you back, hit that like button and stay tuned. The journey of transformation begins now. There comes a moment in every person's life, a quiet moment, often surrounded by uncertainty, when the truth breaks through the noise. You've been walking the path of doubt for so long that you start to wonder if you're ever going to reach the place where you belong. Maybe it was in the middle of a job you hated, or in the silence of a family gathering where you felt like an outsider. Maybe it was when you looked in the mirror one day and realized that the life you're living isn't truly yours. Whatever it was a moment that stopped you in your tracks, and for the first time, you could hear the faint whisper of a voice that had been trying to get your attention all along. God's message to you has always been clear, even when you couldn't hear it. You were never meant to fit into the world's expectations. You were called to stand out, to be different, and to live a life that reflects the purpose He set out for you before you were even born. It's easy to get caught up in the expectations of others, the pressure to get the promotion, to keep up with the neighbors, or to play it safe and stay in your comfort zone. But the truth is, the very fact that you don't fit in is a sign that you're not meant to. This realization can be a hard pill to swallow, especially if you've spent years trying to force yourself into a mold that never quite fit. But once you let go of the need for approval and embrace your uniqueness, a world of opportunity opens up. The struggle you faced in feeling out of place was never a sign of failure. It was God's way of preparing you for something bigger. You've been walking a path of spiritual growth, whether you've recognized it or not. The doubts, the loneliness, the frustration, it's all part of a divine design. And now, as you begin to understand that your purpose is bigger than fitting in, you're ready to take the next step. There's a verse in the Bible that speaks directly to this moment. "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future." Jeremiah 29:11. This verse isn't just a comforting thought, it's a promise. The plans God has for you have always been bigger than the life you've been living. And while it may feel uncomfortable, even painful, to let go of the life you thought you were supposed to have, it's actually a step toward the fulfillment of the promise He's placed over your life. The more you try to fit into a life that's not yours, the more you miss out on the incredible things God has set aside for you. But when you accept that you were never meant to fit in, that's when the transformation begins. And it's a transformation that will touch every area of your life, your relationships, your career, and most importantly, your spiritual journey. At this point, you might be wondering how to make this shift. How do you move from a life of trying to fit in to embracing the truth that you were chosen for something greater? The first step is simple, but it requires great courage. You have to believe that you are more than just a product of your circumstances. You have to trust that the unique path you're walking has been designed for you by a loving and purposeful God. This is your moment to rise above the noise of the world and begin walking in the fullness of your divine calling. As you begin to step into this new reality, you'll notice something incredible happening inside of you. You'll start to feel peace where there once was anxiety, joy where there once was frustration, and a deep sense of purpose where there once was confusion. It's not because your life will suddenly be perfect, but because you'll be living in alignment with your true calling. And when you align yourself with God's purpose, He equips you with everything you need to thrive. The journey ahead won't always be easy. There will be moments of doubt, moments when you question if you're on the right path. But remember, those moments are part of the process. They're the building blocks of the strength you'll need to carry out the purpose God has given you. And as you continue to rise, you'll find that your purpose becomes clearer with each step you take. You were never meant to fit in. You were made to stand out, to shine the light of God's love and truth in a world that desperately needs it. It's time to embrace your destiny, to step into the life you were always meant to live. So, take that first step. Trust that God is guiding you every step of the way. Your journey is just beginning, and the world is waiting for you to rise. There are moments in life that stop you in your tracks. You don't expect them, and yet, when they come, they feel like a turning point. The kind of moment that shakes everything you thought you knew about yourself and your place in the world. For most people, these moments come after years of feeling lost or disconnected, of trying to fit into a world that doesn't seem to understand you. But what if that feeling of being out of place wasn't a mistake? What if it was a sign that you were never meant to fit in? That's the moment I want to share with you, the moment when everything changes, when you realize that you weren't born to live a life of conformity. You were born to rise. It was a Tuesday morning in early fall when John Simmons felt it. The chill in the air carried more than just the scent of autumn. It felt like the weight of something much heavier. John had lived his entire life trying to please others. He was in his late 40s, living in a small town in Ohio, working a 9-to-5 job at a local insurance company. To the outside world, John had it all: steady job, a family, a house in the suburbs. But for years, something gnawed at him. There was an emptiness inside him that no amount of success or comfort could fill. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was meant for something more, something beyond the life he had built around expectations his own and those of others. John's journey had always been about trying to fit in. He went to church every Sunday, not because he was moved by the word of God, but because it was what he was supposed to do. He worked hard at his job, climbed the corporate ladder, and did everything expected of him. But deep inside, he felt like an imposter. He wasn't living authentically. He was simply going through the motions. It wasn't until that fall morning, after another sleepless night tossing and turning with unanswered questions, that he finally understood. John wasn't meant to fit in. He was meant to rise. It was a brief, quiet moment just after the sun had risen when he stepped outside onto his front porch and looked at the world around him. The leaves on the trees were just beginning to change, and there was a stillness in the air. In that stillness, he heard something deep within him. It wasn't a loud voice, but it was powerful. A voice that spoke to him with authority and love, a voice he hadn't heard in a long time. It said, "You were never meant to fit in. You were chosen for something greater. Now, rise." This moment changed everything for John. It wasn't just a spiritual awakening. It was the beginning of a journey he'd been avoiding for years. It was as if all the struggles and doubts he'd faced in his life suddenly made sense. The disappointments, the loneliness, the feeling of being lost. It wasn't a sign of failure. It was preparation. God had been quietly shaping him for something greater, and now the time had come to step into his true calling. John's whole life had been built on the belief that success meant fitting in. He had always measured himself by the standards of society, the American dream. A good job, a house with a white picket fence, a family that looked perfect on paper. He thought that was the goal, that was what he was supposed to want. But deep down, it never felt like enough. It wasn't until he realized that he was living someone else's dream that everything began to change. As John sat in his favorite armchair that morning, staring out at the quiet neighborhood, it was like a veil had been lifted from his eyes. The years of trying to meet expectations, his father's, his boss's, even his own, had been leading him away from the truth. He wasn't meant to fit into this world. He was meant to stand apart, to walk a different path. The realization was terrifying at first. He'd spent so many years building a life that seemed perfect from the outside. But now he understood that it was only a facade. It wasn't his life. It was the life he thought he was supposed to want. John thought of the times he had gone to church, sitting quietly in the pews, listening to the pastor talk about God's plan. He had always nodded along, but it had felt distant. He couldn't feel that divine connection. He didn't understand the deeper purpose of his life because he had been so focused on meeting the world's standards. But now, as he sat in silence on that chilly morning, something shifted inside him. He could hear God's voice clearly for the first time in years. It wasn't a voice of condemnation or guilt, but one of gentle but firm guidance. You were never meant to fit in. You were chosen. Your purpose is greater than the world has told you. You are not ordinary. You are set apart for something greater than you can imagine. The truth hit him like a ton of bricks. For the first time, John understood that the pain, the frustration, and the sense of not belonging weren't signs of failure. They were signs of God's calling. He had been living his life in the way everyone else told him to, but God had been preparing him for something more. It was time to rise, to step into the purpose that had been waiting for him all along. But as with any awakening, this realization didn't come without its challenges. John knew that the path he was about to take wouldn't be easy. He would have to leave behind the comfort of his current life and venture into the unknown. The world would try to pull him back, to distract him with the promises of success and approval. But now, he had a greater understanding. He was no longer afraid of standing out. In fact, he was beginning to see that his difference was his strength. It wasn't just about living for himself anymore. It was about living for God's purpose. And that purpose was greater than anything he had ever imagined. It was about stepping into his divine destiny, no longer trying to fit into a world that didn't understand him. He was chosen for a purpose that went beyond his comfort zone, beyond the expectations of those around him. John Simmons woke up to the soft rays of morning sunlight pouring through his bedroom window. It was a typical fall morning in his small town in Ohio, and the world outside seemed to be carrying on like usual. The leaves on the trees were turning orange and gold. The crisp autumn air filled the streets, and the hum of everyday life drifted in through his window. But inside, John felt a sense of heaviness in his heart that he couldn't shake. He was in his late 40s, living what appeared to be a stable, comfortable life. He had a steady job, a family, a house in the suburbs. Everything that the American dream promised. And yet, he felt like an imposter in his own life. Every day, he went through the motions, not really feeling like he was living. He was existing, not thriving. He wasn't sure when it had started, but somewhere along the way he'd lost touch with himself. He'd been too busy trying to meet the expectations of everyone around him, his family, his co-workers, his friends, to realize that his own dreams had gotten lost in the shuffle. John had grown up in a religious family, going to church every Sunday, praying before meals, and following all the rules. He had always believed that God had a plan for him, but he couldn't quite figure out what that plan was. He had always done what was expected of him, but now, as he sat in the quiet of his room, he couldn't help but wonder if he had missed something along the way. He'd been trying to fit into a life that didn't feel like his, and in doing so, he had lost touch with the person he was meant to be. It was then that he heard the still, quiet voice that had been whispering to him for years, but he had been too distracted to listen. It wasn't loud or forceful, but it was powerful, as if it was coming from deep within his soul. "John," the voice said, "you were never meant to fit in. You were chosen for something greater. It's time to rise." The words echoed in his mind, and for the first time in a long time, he felt the weight of them settle deep into his heart. He wasn't just hearing these words for the first time. He had felt them before, but now they seemed to hold more weight, more truth. It was as if everything he had been going through, the struggles, the confusion, the feeling of being disconnected, was suddenly coming into focus. The voice was not condemning him for his past decisions, but was gently reminding him that his purpose had always been bigger than the life he had been living. He had been chosen, and now it was time to rise and step into the fullness of that calling. John sat up in bed, his heart pounding. He knew, deep down, that something was shifting in him. The life he had been living was no longer enough. He had been following the path laid out for him by others, but now he understood that his path was different. He wasn't meant to follow the crowd. He was meant to stand out, to embrace the uniqueness that had always set him apart. God had a plan for him, a plan that was bigger than anything he had ever imagined. The next few days were filled with a sense of urgency as John began to process everything that had been revealed to him. He spent hours in prayer, asking for guidance, for clarity, for the strength to make the changes he knew were coming. He realized that his journey wasn't just about finding his purpose. It was about trusting that God had already prepared him for what lay ahead. He had been through so many struggles, so many moments of doubt and confusion, but now he saw them as part of a larger design. He wasn't alone on this journey. God had been with him every step of the way, shaping him, preparing him for the moment when he would finally understand his true calling. John knew that the first step on this new path would not be easy. He had spent so many years building a life based on the expectations of others, and now he was being called to tear it all down and start fresh. It wasn't just about changing his job or his circumstances. It was about changing his mindset, his priorities, and the way he saw himself. He couldn't keep living for the approval of others. He had to live for the purpose that God had set out for him. He started small, making changes in his daily routine. He began to spend more time in prayer and reflection, seeking God's guidance in every decision. He started to let go of the things that had been holding him back, the fear of failure, the need for validation, the desire to please others. It was a difficult process, but with each step, he felt a sense of peace and clarity that he had never experienced before. He was starting to embrace the person God had always intended him to be. As the weeks went by, John began to see his life transform in ways he hadn't expected. He had always believed that happiness came from external circumstances, having the right job, the right house, the right social status. But now he realized that true happiness came from within. It came from knowing that he was walking in God's purpose, doing the work that he had been called to do. John's work life had always been the foundation of his identity. He had spent so many years climbing the corporate ladder, trying to make a name for himself. But now he found himself questioning everything. What did it all mean? Was he truly fulfilling his purpose? He began to pray for guidance about his career, and as he did, opportunities started to appear. Opportunities that aligned with his newfound sense of purpose. He was led to start a small non-profit organization that helped underprivileged youth in his community. It wasn't the easy path, and it wasn't the path that would make him rich, but it was the path that filled him with a sense of fulfillment and joy. He realized that this was what he had been searching for all along. It wasn't about fitting into the mold of success that society had set for him. It was about using his gifts and talents to make a difference in the lives of others. He felt more alive than he had in years. He had stepped into his true calling, and in doing so, he had found a deep sense of purpose that had been missing from his life. John's journey wasn't without its challenges. As he began to step into his purpose, he faced resistance from many of the people around him. His family, his friends, and even his colleagues questioned his decision to leave his stable job and pursue something so uncertain. They didn't understand why he was choosing to live a life that was so different from what they had envisioned for him. At first, John felt the sting of their criticism. He doubted himself at times, wondering if he had made the right choice. But as he continued to pray and seek God's guidance, he was reminded of the verse in Romans 8:28. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. This verse became his anchor. He knew that he was walking in God's purpose, and that no matter what obstacles he faced, God was with him every step of the way. John learned to lean into his faith, trusting that God would provide the strength and resources he needed to continue on this path. He faced setbacks and struggles, but with each challenge he grew stronger. He began to see that the resistance he faced wasn't a sign that he was on the wrong path. It was a sign that he was on the right one. The world didn't understand his calling, but that was okay. He didn't need their approval anymore. He had God's approval, and that was enough. As time went on, John's life began to reflect the transformation he had gone through. He had stepped into his purpose, and now he was walking in the fullness of it. He was no longer seeking validation from the world. He was living for God's glory. He had found his true calling, and in doing so, he had found peace, fulfillment, and joy. But the journey didn't end there. John knew that God had more in store for him. He had risen, but now it was time to help others rise as well. He became a mentor to those who were struggling with the same feelings of doubt and confusion that he had once faced. He shared his story with others, encouraging them to step into their own purpose, to embrace their uniqueness, and to rise above the fear and doubt that held them back. John's life had come full circle. He had gone from feeling lost and disconnected to living a life of purpose and passion. He had learned that true success wasn't about fitting in. It was about rising to the calling that God had placed on his life. And now, as he looked back on his journey, he knew that every step had been worth it. John had finally stepped into his true purpose, and in doing so, he had found the fulfillment he had been searching for all along. He had risen, and he was ready to help others rise as well. John had always been a man of routine. His life was structured, predictable, and for the most part, comfortable. But comfort, he realized now, had become a cage. He had spent his years building a life based on the expectations of others, his parents, his community, his own ideas of what success looked like. He had checked off all the boxes, Graduate high school, go to college, get married, have kids, buy a house, get a steady job. And yet, when he looked in the mirror, he didn't see the man he was meant to be. He saw a man who had played it safe his entire life, too afraid to take risks, too afraid to follow his heart. The realization hit him hard. He had spent so much time trying to fit into a mold that wasn't even his. That morning, standing on his porch, John made a choice. He chose to let go of the life he had been holding on to so tightly. He had spent years building it, but now he saw that it wasn't the life God had intended for him. It was a life of comfort, yes, but not a life of purpose. John knew that if he was to rise and step into the purpose that was waiting for him, he had to let go of everything that was holding him back. The first step was admitting that he had been living in fear. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of the unknown. Fear had kept him stagnant, paralyzed in a life that was safe but unfulfilling. He had never taken the risks that he now realized he was meant to take. John thought back to the times he had questioned his choices, the moments when he felt something stirring inside him but pushed it down because it didn't fit with the life he had built. He had ignored his calling, believing that the life he was living was good enough. But it wasn't enough. As John sat down at his kitchen table that morning, he opened his Bible to a passage that had always spoken to him, but now felt like a divine revelation. "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future." Jeremiah 29:11. These words hit him like a wave, washing over him, reminding him that God had a plan for his life all along, a plan that was bigger than anything he had been pursuing. He was not just meant to live the same life as everyone else. He was chosen for something far greater. John had always believed that God's plan was something distant, something out of reach. But now he understood. The plan was right in front of him. It was the life he was meant to lead, the purpose he was meant to fulfill. And the only thing standing in the way was his own fear. John's life began to change the moment he decided to let go. It wasn't a dramatic, instant transformation, but it was a shift, a quiet turning of the tide. He started by doing things that scared him. He reached out to old friends and mended relationships that had been strained for years. He started praying with intention, asking God to guide him every step of the way. He knew that the path ahead wouldn't be easy, but he also knew that God was with him. He no longer felt the need to hide behind the safety of his old life. He was stepping into something bigger. The next change came in his work life. John had always worked in insurance, a field that offered stability but little satisfaction. He had grown comfortable in the routine of it, but the passion was gone. It was clear now that his purpose lay elsewhere. He wasn't sure what that would look like, but he knew he had to take the leap. He began to explore different opportunities that aligned with his calling. He wasn't sure where he was going, but he knew that God would show him the way. At first, it was terrifying. The fear of the unknown crept back in. What if he failed? What if he made the wrong choice? But with every prayer, with every step of faith, John felt more at peace. He began to trust that God's plans were greater than his own, that even when the path ahead was unclear, God was guiding him every step of the way.